a glamorous title. It's Head of Global Media Accountability and Sourcing. And sourcing spelled not like a source, right?
Correct.
Did you grow up wanting to be a global media accountability and sourcing expert?
No.
No?
No. So that's it's a kind of a fascinating place that I've ended up in, and maybe some useful context. So I got into the industry at the end of 2000, the end of the Olympics. Fell into it kind of purely by chance. I won't bore you with those details. And worked in a media consultancy for about 12 or so years before joining.
So you were Faulkner, right?
Yeah, correct. A company called Faulkner Media Management, which has now been swallowed up by Ubiquity many, many moons ago. Left there a few years ago and joined McDonald's as the head of media for Australia, which had the responsibility of all things media, but also kind of agency management and the total marketing fund budget. Principal goal back in those days was always about how to maximise those dollars, whether or not it was the total marketing fund, i.e. agency fees and production, or media, but it was always to maximise those to get the best business outcomes. Even my media consultancy days, it was to maximise value from the media budget. Into McDonald's, head of media for Australia for a few years, then I joined the global media team, so still in media per se, and a role came up which we created all around the words accountability and ROI, and I like that ROI addition to that title. That was my attempt at being creative. It's always an irony being creative in the media space, but I thought it was a nice little link as it helped provide that focus on ultimately what our goal was to ensure that everything we're doing in that space was delivering a return. Whether or not it's the right word, wrong word, but it was all about business outcomes. So for me, that made a lot of sense. Again, for some bizarre reasons, I've jumped ship and I'm now in the world of procurement. So I don't know if there's any procurement people in the room. Feel free to throw rocks at me. Been there, done that. I know what procurement the usual reaction to most people when they hear the word procurement. I'm now one of those scary guys, so it's kind of amusing. The fox and the henhound at the moment, potentially. But my views haven't changed, and that's hopefully what I'm bringing to our world of procurement or sourcing, is that our goal is to maximise return. It's not actually about savings and driving the bottom dollar, it's actually the upside. So for me, this whole space of measurement effectiveness is absolutely crucial because it's what we need to all do. So it feels like I'm kind of preaching to the converted in this room.
That's all right. We can all learn.
Wasn't what I grew up to plan to be, but it's now what I'm currently doing.
That's great. And being a global person in Australia, so where's the rest of the global team? Are you all over the place?
Yeah, somewhere, just kind of behind me. I've lost track of where they are. No, it's been a new kind of space. It's me, myself, and myself. So it's a role where it's really about trying to establish best practice guidelines, and try and make people aware of them around the world. We have lots of challenges, and ultimately get to a place where they actually embrace what we're talking about. And if we can get to that space, and it's key kind of foundational principles. Measurement is one of those. Do you have measurement in place? And if the answer is no, why not? Do you have kind of values around transparency? Do you have good agency management practices in place? And if all those things are in place, including measurement, we've got a good start of a conversation, and then we try and share best practice wherever we can around those guidelines.
So how much do you standardise across markets?
To a degree, and it's the balancing act. One, as a business, we're a very decentralised business, so our focus has really been on, trying to influence markets on what we think best practice is. But if we'll put goals out there, it's kind of almost the start of the conversation. So we've never got to a point where, let's use viewability, and it'll probably pop up a little bit later on, where I inherited a global master services agreement, which had written into that, you shall deliver 80% viewability. It's like, what is that all about? Whereas my view is that's the start of a conversation. If that's not relevant for your market, then you need to have that conversation between local client, local agency, and make sure those goals make sense. And invariably, those conversations would happen, and then they'd adjust those kind of expectations.
So you said your focus is on ROI. How do you diagnose that? Like, there's so many ways, right? And it can take a long time to get to understand what's happened a couple of years back. Yeah,
definitely. So the way we've approached it, and again, this will vary from market to market, was putting measurement practices around what we refer to as market mix modelling in place was our way of cracking that. And I always felt that helped get rid of some of the subjectivity in the conversation. We'd have a lot of conversations, and we think of our stakeholders. It's not just the usual people within the organisation, it's our licensee group. We'd have a lot of conversations around, that was a great campaign. And my response to that was frankly, how on earth do you know that was a great campaign? On what definition is that a great campaign? And you start talking about all these variables that can actually impact that great campaign. Whether or not it's the weather, whether or not it's the pricing, whether or not it's the fact that you've refurbished your restaurant, whether or not the product is great, whether or not the creative is outstanding, what media channels have you used. All those variables come into it. How do you actually understand which one of those drove that outcome? And then even if you know which one of those drove that outcome, how much did each one of those drive that outcome? Modelling, for me, my view is that modelling is the best way to answer that question. So many markets have had kind of dipsticks. They go in there, do a model, it'd sit on the shelf, collect dust for 12 months, never get looked at again. Other markets were doing it more regularly. So we started down a process of globally saying it's important. Let's actually appoint a global provider in that space. We did that a couple of years ago. Some markets...
Who's the provider, Chris?
Our global provider is Analytic Partners. We were working with them in Australia prior to that, so we've actually been working with them for quite a period of time. So number one, get measurement in place. Number two, get a good, credible marketing effectiveness provider. And then for me, it's about trying to do it regularly. So we have some markets that still very much a once a year, every so often type approach. Whereas what we're seeing here in Australia is that we do this quarterly. So we get an update every single quarter on what's been going on. And we've now been doing that for the last 5.5 years in Australia.
And how, you don't have to answer this, but you're up on stage. And how does that go working with your agencies? Like, are they on board? Like, is it, without, how have you, let me word it this way. How have you managed to bring all your stakeholders along on this journey, whether it be creative or media or social or, everyone who's got a different take on what's working?
So I'll speak from an Australian perspective because we are in a really, really good spot with all of the above. So globally, still some challenges. So I think day one, the challenges were kind of probably, oh my God, how much data do we need to provide? And this is going to swarm us and that kind of perspective from the media agency. But if you then get through all those issues, once they start seeing the numbers, it suddenly became, okay, this actually helps us do a better job. And I'm a big believer on the media agency side, and I've had these conversations with kind of investment people. They don't get out of bed to deliver media savings. They actually get out of bed to deliver business outcomes. So they said, okay, this actually helps us deliver a better business outcome. It sounds absolutely fantastic. So we've actually at the point where our media agencies globally are very much aligned with how can we be more focused on business outcomes? Change the word ROI, I don't care. Business outcomes and less about kind of inputs and media savings. They help drive that. So we've got the media agencies on board and we've now got the creative agencies on board as well. And for me, that was probably a bigger exercise because their usual reaction was it's all about efficiencies or some such balaba. The end of the 60-second TVC, if you're a creative agency, it'll never ever happen again. Just suddenly they realise creative plays a role in that calculation. So ROI, in my simple terminology, I'm not a research expert. Some other guys will come up here and explain it a hell of a lot better than I do, but ROI is driven by a mixture of the response to said advertising and kind of the price component. So if you've got great placement, great product, great advertising, you're going to drive that response, and then how much do you kind of pay for that? So creative plays a huge role, and the fact that we've now got data to kind of start demonstrating the role that creative is playing, it helps.
Well, they should be flattered, right? Analytic Partners shows what 70% of the impact is on the creative. So
yeah, correct, which is really disappointing from a media guy. They did explain it. It's a slight tweak on that, but by and large, it plays a massive, massive role. So they're on board, and we've got to the point where now they're KPI'd on it. So you go to a point where it's totally resistant. They're actually now KPI'd on helping us improve that ROI. So it's early days. Hopefully that fuels that kind of village approach. They actually want to work collaboratively to get a better business outcome. And again, goes back to the start point. We've got the right KPIs in place, which is driving business outcomes.
So market mix modelling is great, but it takes a while. What's your approach to new formats, innovation, trying new things?
For us, it touches on that frustration. There is without doubt, a time delay, and we're doing market mix modelling. We're not doing what we call multi-touch attribution. We haven't don't think we've cracked that really yet in any market. So it's still more the traditional big market mix modelling. There is a time lag, and that's probably its biggest frustration of how long. So for us, again, it's probably more looking at the consistent trends, number one. And if we constantly see this trend of whether on it's format or media type, always in this kind of relativity position, okay, we can probably be fairly confident about what that will look like moving forwards. It then means on the flip side, if you want to try something new, for me, one of the key learnings was don't just kind of media agency come up with that recommendation, but actually talk with our company, analytic partners, around how best to test that to ensure that we've got a good chance of identifying somewhere in the future that it worked. It won't be instantaneous. It'll be 3 months, 6 months, somewhere into the future. But then that's that kind of long-term test and learn cycle. And if we do that with, in our case, analytic partners involved, that'll help ensure that we're doing it enough. So we've been very guilty in the past of having a media plan which has 25 different thousand formats on it. Therefore, it's really hard for any company to tease out the impact of any one of those things. So how do we consolidate some of those, trial something like that, and then if it is 3 or 6 months later, we'll find out if it works. So there is a lag. Love it to be instantaneous. That's the ongoing goal, but we're not quite there yet.
So it sounds like a lot of work's gone on to get it right. Can you tell if it's making things work better?
Yes. Beauty of numbers. The numbers hopefully don't lie. Stats, what's the expression? Stats and lies and statistics or something or other. Whatever that expression is, hopefully they don't lie. So that's, I suppose, you need that credible provider, number one. But
so is that both in terms of effectiveness and efficiency? Like,
or if we look at, if we just use that ROI,
yep.
That simple ROI, when we roll up our data in Australia, and again, I'll speak to Australia because I'm much closer to it since I've been involved in that process, the ROI is almost doubled over the last 5 or 6 years. So the contribution of media to business outcomes is almost doubled. And to kind of counter that, you've cut your media budget. We've actually increased our media budget through that time. So it's off the back of a growing media budget, and we know we can continue to grow that media budget. We can get more growth still to come because we know where our levers are and how much more we can increase in any kind of media channel or format.
So without giving away secrets, are there any particularly obvious levers that you've pulled to do that?
Yeah, it's. I mean, there's probably a range of examples. So I suppose I'll put my little caveat clause out there. I'm not pro any media channel. I'm just actually pro understanding which media channel works and why. But the key learning that came for us when we first did this is we jumped into 5 or 6 years ago, we were spending probably about 10% of our media budget in McDonald's land in the world of digital. Wind the clock forward, it's probably tripled in that space of time. When we first started increasing it, we did it on the belief that it was the right thing to do just based on kind of consumers and what was going on in their world. The data hasn't it has actually then backed up. So the key learning that came from that was that digital works in combination with all the other media channels. So that was a nice thing. So that's therefore reinforced that if we put more money into digital, incremental money into digital, it would help drive us a return. But we've got to have those building blocks of TV, radio, outdoor within that. So the conversation earlier around it's all media together actually gets us the best outcome. Well and truly holds true for us as a business. So biggest learning was for us, digital does return. Doesn't just mean blanket just throw money into digital because we know from everything we've done, there's so many different kind of scenarios, starting with what type of message have you got there. There are some messages that work better in certain digital areas than other digital areas or don't even go near digital. So you've got to get that right message. So we've had scenarios where when we've used Instagram as an example, it hasn't worked as well as if it does on Facebook. So even simple examples like that. We've seen scenarios where going to other media channels, we can get good results out of AM radio, whereas for other campaign types, we get FM radio. We've got abilities to slice and dice the data. And for me, the message isn't so much what's worked for you. It's actually the most important thing is the ability to have that data to answer those questions yourselves. So whether or not it's been number of messages, whether or not it's been how much weight to put on any area, whether or not it's video, whether or not it's on TV on a weekly basis. It's whether or not it's this type of message on large format outdoor works better than small format outdoor. This type of message is great for a 6-second bumper. All those components come together, we can start answering those questions. We can look at things like metro versus regional versus national. There's so many kind of nuances within it that helps us do a better job.
So is this approach, your approach, I mean, that's in the States as well? They're following the same
The States, yeah, the States are a little bit behind us. It's quite ironic. The States is probably well behind where they really need to be, both on digital and also in the measurement of that kind of space. For us, the other key markets that are probably doing a good job of understanding what's going on is probably the UK, is probably the next best. Canada and Germany have also been doing some interesting work, and their approaches have been pretty interesting as well.
So some of the smaller markets, I guess, that might struggle to do it. I'm trying to make some comparisons for marketers in the room that may not have your budget. What's sort of the main barrier there? Is it getting access to data? What's the
main barrier? So for me, because I've always had this similar conversation with a very small market of ours, at what point can you start? And I think it's starting with the philosophy from the top that measurement is kind of crucial. And in the absence of, if you really think the budget's not there to do some sort of measurement for whatever reason, can you at least have the philosophy of everything you're doing in the media space, media strategy, media planning, media buying, is going to help deliver that outcome. So at least if you have the same philosophy, if you can't afford the budget. But my view is the budget is so well spent, without doubt. So whether or not we're spending doesn't really matter the numbers. Everyone knows what kind of budgets we have here in Australia. It's a lot. On media, the cost of actually doing the measurement is a fraction of a percent. So you're going to get the returns, and I'm sure they will apply for many, many, many small businesses. Investing in measurement means you can make those better decisions. You move away from that subjectivity. So I really am a strong believer on you've got to find some sort of measurement to help answer those questions and get away from that subjectivity.
And I don't think we can read an article in the trade press at the moment without the short-term, long-term discussion. Now, I know Analytics Partners build that into it. How much, everyone's looking for that magic number. Have you changed your approach to long-term, short-term investment?
We haven't changed our views towards it. We are still, I think we'd honestly say we're still behind where we'd like to be.
In terms of brand investment?
In terms of brand investment. Yeah. So again, we've got the data to support that the long-term benefits are really strong and powerful, and we know what kind of returns we get. I think you'll hear some similar comments. We're seeing at least 2 to 3 times the short-term benefit in the long term, which for us is fantastic. You've got to
manage franchisees as well, I imagine.
That's principally why we're probably so far behind. You kind of have this challenge around, again, we think about our stakeholders. We've got licensees that usually are over the age of 50 plus. Digital doesn't work because I don't see it, so that's our good start point. But ultimately what drives their sales is when the poster's up outside their store saying offer. Of course, they'll drive it into store anyway. So we've got a real education challenge around there. Try to explain to them that we're going to put brand out there, but we don't come in tomorrow and buy brand. The cash register doesn't have a thing which says brand. It has Big Macs and shakes and fries. So that ongoing challenge between short-term sales, and we get daily sales, probably other businesses are very much like that. So if the sales are negative, headlights, flashes, everything starts going off. So it is that short-term mentality. So it's trying to get that balance. It's much easier when your business is going well to try and get more of the long term. We know the benefits, but we by no means have cracked that as a business. But I am very much supportive of the notion that you do have to get that balance. I wish I could say we've cracked it, but we haven't.
Tricky. Presumably consumer confidence being weaker, it's at the moment.
Correct. But then we can have, and this is the irony, even though we've got markets within our system, the UK market has had something like 40 plus consecutive quarters of growth. So that's over 10 years of consecutive growth on growth on growth on growth. And by growth, I'm talking almost double-digit growth. They will isolate all the kind of key reasons they think that's contributed to that growth. And one of the ones they're talking about is investment behind brand. So we can have case studies from within the system which says invest behind brand, yet other markets still say, where's my nearest LTO, what's my latest offer, et cetera, et cetera. So it's still a battle within ourselves.
Great. Thank you for sharing.